whatsoever. So, when she's talking here about a churned up and examined past, what does she mean by this? Yeah.
I think she means that it's churned up maybe because we might have forgotten, misinterpreted, or missed out on it. Or we might not have remembered very clearly, and that's why we can see what makes up.
Yeah, so if we don't remember our past clearly, what's an approach we can take? Well, first of all, why would we want to know our past? That's the ideal, to learn from it. To learn from it. It's just, someone was saying earlier that we look at our past and it's like, oh, we shouldn't forget our past. Yeah, or maybe we learn from our past. But what if we learn from it? But we should remember it, not just so we can have some kind of nice memory, but also so that we can learn what not to do next time, and also what to do next time. Oftentimes we like to live with this idea about no regrets or no ragrets, right? Yeah, no regrets. But if you don't have any regrets, then you haven't done anything really dramatic yet. You haven't done any. I mean, you should have some regrets in life, because if you have regrets, it's because you took some chances. And if you took some chances, it's going to mean that you're going to fail. And you're going to wish that you hadn't failed in certain circumstances. And then we'll say these things like, I don't regret my past because it made me who I am today. And, another Instagram comment, but man, think about what that says. That means that what you are today, you think is wonderful and spectacular and great, and is exactly what a person should be. If you believe that, then you've got no reason to grow in any way. The only reason that you want to grow is because you think you've got room to grow. You can get better in some way. And so, she's talking about, should we live trapped between this churned up and examined past and the future that awaits that work? But that future only awaits the work if you do it. In other words, where you're going, a lot of times is a trajectory that was generated when you were very young. Probably too young, certainly too young to remember, so these things are in your unconscious. But also at times when you didn't have a choice over it all. It's like, for example, if you don't like reading, I would bet that you probably grew up without being forced to read. You probably didn't read much when you were growing up. And that's because you had parents who didn't value reading. Now, this isn't saying parents didn't care about education and that's not about. We'll look at it seriously. Ask yourself a question: do you have more books or TVs in your house? Do you have more books or computers in your house? Do you have more books or phones in your house? And that will tell you, because what we buy is what we value. And so if you value books, you would have a lot of them around. I bet for those of you who grew up around a lot of books, you read a lot, and so you're going to get used to it. Just like if you grew up with eating vegetables, you probably are used to it, and it's not so bad for you. Reading is kind of like this as well. But none of you sat there at 2 years old and said, Mom, you need to read to me more. Mom, we need to get some more children's books. We need to spend 30 minutes before bedtime every day, make it part of a routine where we read together so that I learn to value literacy. Anybody do that with their family? Like I talk about myself, and do I enjoy reading? Not particularly. It's there's so many more immediately exciting and gratifying things to do, but I also don't want to be stupid. And that's something you got to look at. And so the reason I read so much is because I had a mom who read so much. And so because she read a lot, when you're a little kid, you do what you see your parents do. And so I saw her read, so I just thought, oh, I need to read. Even, they told me stories. I had a book that would open up, and even if I didn't understand it, I would just sit there with a book because my mom had one. And so I was reading when I was 3 years old, beginning of my third year. And no, I'm not talking about reading Plato, obviously reading children's books and all that, but that comes from having that kind of influence around. Now again, I didn't choose that. I didn't ask my mom to, Mom, can you read to me more in these ways? But there's something that happened back then that set my life on a trajectory. I didn't think about, like the story I've told you guys before about the math teacher who told us that we were basically retarded and would never learn math anyway. And so he'd read stories to us. He read stories to us. And that probably set me on a path, because I think I looked at it and said, yeah, I think he's right. I am basically retarded, and I'm not really learning math right now. but man, I loved his stories. You know? And so that wasn't necessarily a thing about, oh, so I should read more so I can write more. It was also just, it was neat listening to the guy talk about it. And I realized that this person telling a story about castles and dragons and things that people have no real experience with outside of their imagination was able to take a group of us in 10th grade and have us all just transfixed, like listening, just like, you know. Then if he said, now, here's how you build a rocket ship with math, we'd all be like, oh, whatever. And so I learned early on that with good stories and proper ways of conveying ideas, well, you can control a crowd. And then you learn that if you can do that, then you can control history, you can control life, you can do a whole lot with that kind of thing. Now, imagine if I was absent that day, that the math teacher told us that. I don't know if I'd be standing where I am right now, better or worse. I wonder where I would be standing. You know, someone could say, well, maybe if you hadn't heard that, you'd be president of the United States or whatever. Whatever, you know, you can go crazy thinking about all those possibilities. And so it isn't so much about going into our past so that we can regret the things and say, man, I wish I hadn't done this, I wish I hadn't done that. But instead, yeah, that was a bad idea. If that situation comes up again, I should do something else, probably. But, yeah, that's if we pursue it that way, though. And that's a hard thing to do, because then that requires us to acknowledge that there's something wrong with the way that we went about it, or something that wasn't an optimum of how we went about it. You know? That's self-reflection. It's difficult to do. It's just easier to turn on YouTube or something and watch a video about something else to take our minds off of it. But notice that she points out that we're trapped. We're trapped between that churned up and then that what future is going to be created by that work that we did, the work of self-discovery, the work of self-examination, to know why we are the ways that we are, to know how it is that we're driven into a certain future by the things that we've experienced before. Usually, again, things that you had no control over. You know? Yeah, relatively straightforward. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yes?
Is there any more of her?
Oh yeah. When I was saying earlier that it's too bad she was Sigmund Freud's daughter because she did a lot of work, but she did some excellent work. If she hadn't been Freud's daughter, she would be more famous. But because she lived in that shadow of who Freud was, she's just not as well known as him. It's all made me think about some great people in history. Man, imagine if you were like, I don't know, think about somebody who was really well known. Imagine if you were Martin Luther King Jr.'s son. Now what are you going to do? Your father changed history and moved the nation. By the way, Martin Luther King Jr. the only person with a federal holiday after him. So think about how high of esteem we hold this guy in. Now you're his son. I can't wait to see what you do.
What's your dream?
Yeah. What's your dream? Yeah. Your dad had a dream. What's your dream? And he's like, I want to be in movies, or I want to be a librarian, or whatever. It's like, oh, and then we think about, oh, that's wasted potential. Because the idea is that no matter what the person does, it's never going to be good enough. Yeah. Think about that, man. Just like sometimes you might think like, man, I wish my parents were rich and famous. Do you?
No. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, just rich. I want the fame for me. Use their money to become famous. So, yeah. So yeah, it's a long answer to your short question. There's lots of stuff for reading. If you have some neat books, I can get you some of the books. Others? Yes.
How active was Sigmund Freud involved in, like as a dad? How involved was he as a dad?
Oh, as I understand it, he was quite involved. Especially with, he had several children. I'm recording this, so I don't want to say how many, because if I'm wrong, they'll hold it against me in the comment section. Yeah, I want to say it was like 7 kids or something like that. But he had several children. But as I understand it, he was pretty well involved in their raising.
Including her? Or?
Yeah, I think especially her, if I'm not mistaken.
She the oldest?
Yeah, I don't know. I think so. You never see the comment section lighting up. Stupid, you shouldn't be teaching. She wasn't the oldest. There were 6 kids, not 7. Others? Yeah.
Did Sigmund Freud commit suicide?
Who?
Sigmund Freud, did he commit suicide?
Basically. No, he didn't commit. He didn't commit suicide. Sigmund Freud, he had cancer. And he had jaw cancer because the guy was constantly smoking cigars. And so he got cancer from that. And at the end of his life, his jaw was so eaten away from the cancer, he couldn't open his mouth anymore. He had to drink food through a straw and all that. But he had a clothespin that he could use to open his mouth so that he could still smoke cigars.
Oh.
That's how addicted he was. That's why I said basically. He was probably on his way out anyway. We don't. It's too bad. We don't have very many recordings of Freud talking. Only when he's a very old man. In fact, like right near his death, we have some videos of him. Yeah, he's a fascinating character. I've talked a bit about him in the past. That he has some he's got kind of off the wall ideas, and that's usually how we remember him. And so if you take a psychology class, or actually not even a psychology class, sorry, if you take a class that doesn't do much psychology, we'll usually point out some of his more out there and absurd ideas. I mean absurd in quotation marks. Because, like I was saying earlier, no regrets, right? This is a guy who was a pioneer. He's the friend of his field. And so almost everything he was doing was pioneering. Almost everything he did was new. Now, if you come out with 100 new ideas that no one's ever come up with before, how many of those are going to be accurate? Very few. Because it's easy to stand on the shoulders of giants and go forward with somebody else's work. But when you're the only one going out there, as I mentioned before, how do you know when you've reached the conclusion? Like mathematics is easy, meaning that if you know how to do the mathematics, if you work long and hard enough, you go through these mechanical processes, generally speaking, you're going to find the solution. And you know there's a solution, because there's a solution to almost everything. But with things like psychology, like philosophy, we don't know that there's a solution to it. So we ask a question about, what impact early childhood experiences have on the psyche. Go. Well, today we just go, well, of course it has an impact. Duh, everyone knows that. That's the guy who came up with it, Sigmund Freud. And so the stuff that he's correct about is so deeply ingrained in our kind of just collective consciousness that we just take it for granted. Oh yeah, we just know this about the world. But the stuff that he seems to have probably been wrong about, it's kind of out there, it's ridiculous, and then we just kind of look at it and go, see, there he goes. He was so wrong about all these things. Freud, how wrong he was. Now he's so right about a lot of things as well. But because he's a pioneering spirit. So if you're someone who's going to be a pioneer, you're going to be wrong about a bunch of stuff, and you're going to take a lot of flack for it. But it's not safe. It's safer to do it to look at what other people have said and done, and then just repeat it. And everyone can think you're smart because you're saying things that somebody else said.
So it's just kind of like, so you have to open the mouth